is basically to talk to people like you and many others and find out, what made them, what setbacks have made them come back in their life. So what I'm calling is a tipping point series under the title Setbacks to Come Back. So I'm just wondering whether these kind of, when I say setback, I'm talking about various things like the adversities, the trauma. It can be health scare, like what happened to me, or some kind of, the intense suffering that creates an inner awakening. And kind of, we wake up and say, what have we been doing all these years? Was I in deep slumber? That kind of feeling. And now you feel that you have to change your direction and change your priorities and perspectives in life, and kind of, putting yourself back on track kind of feeling. And that seems to happen only from an intense suffering or a trauma or adversities. For many people, I don't know whether that is right or wrong, but I realize, Sandeep, you also had some kind of setbacks in your life as well, some years ago. And I'm just keen to understand, what went through and how you got back into life and put yourself on a right path where you were able to understand your priorities and perspectives in life. Sandeep.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you ask a question like this, it makes you reflect back on the journey you've been on. And I think in my case, I've probably been in a process of introspection over the last 20 odd years. And I think that goes back to a time when I was about 40, about 20 years ago, when I was at the ANZ Bank at that time, and I was in a senior manager role.
So where were you in ANZ here in Melbourne here?
In Melbourne,
okay.
Looking after the operations center for Victoria and Tasmania. I had about 200 odd people reporting into me. And I was on a very good, sort of run with the bank. I'd been with them since 1995. I started my career in India, and then they brought me to Australia in a variety of different roles. So
all with ANZ.
All with ANZ. So I was always well regarded. I had a good sort of run with the bank, and they looked after me really well. And I got all the opportunities because I worked at the bank. But then there was this one incident that changed everything for me. It was, I was running an operations team, and we had some unforeseen losses because of a particular feature that was inadvertently turned on in the system, and that allowed people to redraw on their loan accounts, even though we had not specifically approved it and sanctioned it. And some people misused that. And suddenly we found we were out of pocket for a certain amount of money, which became a big issue in the bank. There was a bit of an investigation. And because it happened on my watch, I was held responsible for what happened. And I was okay with all of that. But what took me by surprise was the way I was being made a scapegoat as a consequence of that. And I felt at that time that my boss, who I expected would support me, in fact was trying to put me as the person who should take the fall for it. And I had the HR team, which I thought would be, working for me. Again, I found that they were, working for the organization, not me. And I realized at that time that you feel very alone. And it was a difficult period for me. And to make things worse, around that same time, I also ruptured my Achilles and I was on crutches. So I was literally struggling both at work, emotionally, and physically. And I had two young boys, and I felt responsible and yet vulnerable. And I went through a difficult period of introspection to see, how do I come out of this? How do you go from being everything is great to everything is not great in such a short period of time? And how can you trust the system after something like this? And that got me really reflecting on life in general, the purpose and meaning of life, what is my role in it. I was already reasonably comfortable in many ways, but what was I going to do for the rest of my life? There was a lot of these questions that started bubbling up, and I was looking for answers, and that got me started on a series of readings and listening to lectures and talking to people.
So when this was happening with the HR, and also your bank, were you made redundant, or were you? No.
I was at that point relieved of my duties in that role.
Right.
But I was put into a project role for a period of time.
Right.
I wasn't made redundant, but I was put a little bit to the side.
Right.
And you feel like you're now not the person you were previously. And it is publicly humiliating because everyone knows that there's a disciplinary action that's being taken, etc. So I didn't leave the bank at that time, but I was put to the side. And because of that period, I actually went through a very transformative journey personally.
Yeah, what was going through you is what we are really, trying to understand. Because, I think there is this person who has created an identity for yourself for a very long time, and that, I'm this person, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm a senior executive. I've been actually looking after all these people. I'm a leadership role. And suddenly this identity or this position comes crumbling down. And what was it that was happening internally, emotionally for you at that time, Sandeep?
Up until that point, I was a chartered accountant. I went and did my MBA at the Asian Institute of Management in the Philippines on a scholarship from the Asian Development Bank. I came back. I had a couple of job offers. I joined ANZ Grindlays in the dealing room. And then they sent me to Australia. So I had a high-flying career. And even when I got this role at a very young age, they gave me a responsibility to run a large team because they regarded me very highly. So there was, my career was going really well and my family life was going really well. And, financially we were in a good position. So everything was going well. And then suddenly one day things changed. And then you start reflecting on, wow, who am I if this is not my position? Or if, suddenly there is this hole in your identity which you don't know how to fill. And you feel insecure, you feel anxious, you feel like you're lost, there is no direction, there are self-doubts, you start wondering how this is going to play out. And you're in a bit of an internal turmoil, right? But in that turmoil, I started doing reading of a kind that I wasn't doing before that, right? It was a much more reflective reading about why do these things happen in life? Why are they there? What reason? And I think I understood at that moment that these moments in life happen to everyone at some point or another. It's a question of what do you do when you're in these situations? Can you learn from it and come out stronger, or do you get defeated by it? And I think those are the kind of choices you have. But to your point, it questions who you are at a core level, and what is your purpose in life and what is the meaning of life. And that was more the question that I was trying to answer at that point. And then that set me off on a journey since then for the last 20 years of totally transforming myself from where I was to, I think, where I am today, which is in a very different space.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be interesting to share with us, your space now. But before that, now these questions, which is like, what is happening to my life and who am I and those kind of questions, was there always in you a long time ago as you were growing up, or was it that this happened just because of what happened to you at the NZ Bank?
I think there were a few seeds of this inner awakening that were planted early on in my life, and I think they were already there. Like my grandfather was very much into this kind of spirituality. After leading a very successful career as a barrister, he went through this similar sort of introspective phase and wrote some books at the end about called Peace, Happiness, Bliss. So I knew there were certain aspects of this that my grandfather had already explored, and he was considered as someone people looked up to because of that kind of an inner transformation. So there was something in my family already there. But then I got exposed to some of this in my growing up years as well, where I was, one of my uncles and aunts were very involved with the J. Krishnamurti Foundation in Chennai. I listened to a Swami Chinmayananda lecture when I was in Singapore doing my one of my MBA trips.
So in fact, a seed was sown.
Correct. Somewhere it was there, but it was not front of mind.
Right.
It was back of mind.
It was a back burner.
Yeah.
And probably the busy life, the corporate life.
Other priorities in life were far more important.
Right. Yeah.
But this event, this situation, just I think opened up another.
Gave you a space to actually
explore this more.
Absolutely. And would you call that a self-discovery or a self-introspection and something of that sort?
Yeah, now when I look back, I would call it like a inner transformation.
Right.
The starting of a inner transformation.
Yeah.
But at that time, it felt more like trying to answer the questions that were burning inside me at that time.
Right.
So I don't think I consciously set out to transform myself. I was just trying to answer the questions that were posing me. And the big question for me was, why do these things happen? What is the purpose behind it? What should I do about it? How do I tackle it?
Yeah.
And what is the meaning of life? What is life all about? Why is it not just a smooth run? Why do you have these ups and downs? What is the purpose of that? And I think I was also trying to figure out, what do I do with the rest of my life? So I was 40. What is the purpose of the rest of my life?
It's kind of the first chapter and then the second chapter kind of thing, isn't it? The second chapter, I want to fix it. So what were the practical things, Sandeep, that you actually were involved in trying to get to the bottom of these questions?
I think one of the things, I read Eckhart Tolle's book called The Power of Now, which was quite sort of eye-opening for me, and this understanding that there's the past and the future, but really life is unfolding in the now. And then what is this now? And he talks about the awareness that comes in the present moment by staying in the now. And so I started exploring this awareness, and to explore awareness, I got into a little bit of meditation. At that time, it was called, I was observing my mind, and I was observing my thoughts, and I was observing what I was going through. So this level of self-awareness heightened a little bit. And then I read more and more and more of different people trying to make sense of what does it mean in a more holistic sense, right? Why do we experience what we experience?
So the awareness that you spoke about, is this something new found for you? And was it not there in you previously, the last almost 40 years prior to?
The ability to analyze how you are going internally for something new. So the awareness of your inner experiences is what this meditation practice that I started doing made me more aware of, right? So that, hey, I didn't realize that when I get angry, I can actually experience that anger even before the outburst. I can physiologically experience it